All right. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Grace and peace to you all from God our Father, Lord Jesus Christ. Thanks for joining us here. I am diving back into the series, Understanding the Bible. This will be part 11. We're now on the 8th book of the Bible. The first 3 parts were just getting the foundation, and then we're going to go on book by book of an overview. Last up, we visited the book of Judges, which, as we saw, was in a short synopsis, is the sin cycle. It was all about Israel's apostasy. Today, we're delving into the book of Ruth. And Ruth, as we'll see here, happened in the days when the judges ruled. So Ruth, Hebrew word of Ruth means a friend or a companion. So we know that the time in which this took place was in the days when the judges ruled. We see that in Ruth 1:1. It came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he, his wife, and his 2 sons. So this is where the book begins. But we can also tell from verses throughout here that it was not a contemporary history. It wasn't like written down, like this is like Ruth's journal or Naomi's journal. As you know, they found their diary. No, this is written after the fact. And we can tell that from things in here, not only, from the beginning, it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. That tells us the judges weren't ruling when this was written. So the period of the judges were over. We're now into the kingships, right? So at its earliest, it's from the time of King Saul. But then we come and look more. We see, like in verse chapter 4, verse 7. Now this was the manner in former time in Israel concerning the redeeming and concerning the changing. So they're having to explain to people, this is what used to happen, which means this thing wasn't happening in their day. So again, this is outside of that time. This is now a later time. And then finally, we see at the end of the book, verses 21 and 22, Solomon begat Boaz, Boaz begat Obed, Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. Okay, so there are 3 main characters in this book. I mean, there's other characters, but the 3 main characters are Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. So this is about their lifetime, but we see it goes on to talk about Boaz begetting Obed, Obed begetting Jesse, and Jesse begetting David. So at minimum, this book was written, or at the earliest this book was written, is during the lifetime of David. So as I've mentioned before in this series, this book was potentially written by a prophet, a judge named Samuel. And that's one of the thoughts within Judaism, that Samuel is the author of this work. And so, like I said, we can see when this was composed, and it would definitely seem within the lifetime of David, because it doesn't go on to say, and he begat Solomon, or it doesn't go on with further genealogy. Yeah, as in all things with this collection of 66 books, the ultimate author is God. So as I was thinking these things last night, Ron was by, and Sam and Ron and I were there at the table talking. I said, hey, do you guys know who Boaz's mother was? Well, who Boaz's mother was? Well, you have it up here on the screen. Solomon became the father of Boaz by Rahab. You guys remember Rahab? In the book of Joshua, she was a harlot who lived on the wall of Jericho, but she was faithful. She had faith in God. She heard of his might and victory, and that he was with Israel, and that other kings fell before him, and she believed that her home was going to become their home. And so in response, she hid the 2 spies, sent the people out chasing them another way, and she became part of the people of Israel. Her and her household were saved. And it's interesting because then she becomes the mother of Boaz. So again, this gives us a time element of when Boaz and Ruth and Naomi lived. It was shortly after the time of Joshua, because Rahab was alive in Joshua's day. She was already a prostitute in those days, so she's old enough to be doing such, but she ends up mothering Rahab. Rahab mothers Boaz. And it's interesting, again, this story for another time, but if you go through what Matthew's going here in the genealogy, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac became the father of Jacob. Jacob became the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah became the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. So it's interesting that Matthew names 4 women in his genealogy, and Tamar wasn't Judah's wife. Remember the whole story with that? And then Perez became the father of Hezron. Hezron became the father of Ram. Ram became the father of Aminadab. Aminadab became the father of Nahshon. Nahshon became the father of Salmon. Salmon became the father of Boaz by Rahab, the harlot. Boaz became the father of Obed by Ruth, the Moabitess. Obed became the father of Jesse, and then Jesse became the father of David, and then David became the father of Solomon by she who was Uriah's wife. So Matthew brings in some interesting stuff in this. Like I said, it's a story for a later day, but nonetheless, so Rahab is part of the genealogy leading to our ultimate kinsman redeemer, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Right? So key verses in here, Ruth 1, 16 and 17. Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to return from following after you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. When you die, or where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And the Lord so do to me, and more also, if nothing but death part me and you." So Ruth, this is a great story of faithfulness and loyalty. And we see and then also 4:17 is another key verse in here. The women and her neighbors gave it a name, saying, "There's a son born to Naomi, and they call his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David." So this book, its point in bringing here is bringing on the genealogy of David. And that's even why it's placed where it's placed in our thing, because it's the bridge between Judges and Samuel's, right, where it is, going from the times of the Judges to David. I was looking out at a bunch of different outlines of what people look at, and this one I found to be really Ruth-centric for the book of Ruth. Essentially, chapter 1, the overview of that is it's Ruth's resolve. The first 5 verses gives her background. 6 through 18 involves her choice to, as we read there in one of those key verses, her choice to say, "I'm staying with you. I'm going with you." Naomi was going to leave Moab and go back home. She's bidding her daughter-in-laws goodbye, and Ruth's like, "I'm resolving to go with you." All right. And then 19 through 22 is her arrival in Bethlehem. Chapter 2, 1 to 23, it's about Ruth's rights. She has a right to glean. And then we read about the results of her gleaning. And the results include Boaz meets Ruth, Boaz protects Ruth, and Boaz provides for Ruth with the handfuls dropped on purpose. And then then from there, it goes back to her reporting to Naomi of her gleaning and knowing Boaz and all that. Chapter 3 is Ruth's request that was suggested by Naomi. It was executed by Ruth and agreed to by Boaz, where she essentially proposed to Boaz. And then chapter 4, Ruth's reward is she got a husband, she got a son, and she got a lineage, though she was a Moabite woman. All right. Boom, and that's it. So another way to look at this book, I was just talking with Ron about this upstairs. Even though this book is called Ruth, it's essentially Naomi's story. In chapter 1 to 5, we have the prologue, kind of giving us a back history of what's happening with Naomi and her family. Chapter 1, verses 6 to 22 goes into Naomi's emptiness, because as she comes there, she, for those unfamiliar with the story, if that's possible here, they had been people of Bethlehem. They were Judahites. They lived in Bethlehem, and there was a famine, and they went down to go live in Moab. And while they were there, her husband passed away. Her 2 sons then passed away. And they had found wives there in Moab. So she had 2 Moabitess daughters-in-law. And she's like, man, I lost it all. Why is God doing this to me? And so she feels empty, and I'm just going to go home with her head hung low. But then in chapter 2, we find Naomi's hope is awakened, especially when she receives word about Ruth and what happened with Boaz and how she met Boaz, and Boaz spoke to her, and that awakened Naomi's hope again. And then in chapter 3, we get a fulfilling of her hope as that's being worked out. And then chapter 4, we see the realization of Naomi's hope in the kinsman redeeming and the receiving of a son. Let's see. So in here we see, this is, I have in here basically the prologue and the epilogue that would give credence to the concept that this story, it begins with a focus on Naomi and ends with a focus on Naomi. So if you read 1 through 5 and 13 to 17, I'll read the 13 to 17 part because we're going to read Ruth 1 in a moment here. But the epilogue is, Boaz took Ruth, she was his wife, and when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception. She bare a son, and the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord, which has not left you this day without a kinsman, that a name may be famous in Israel. And he shall be unto thee a restorer of your life, and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, which loves you, which is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became nurse unto it. And the women, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, there was a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse and the father of David. So the focus is on Naomi's restoration. And they're saying, this is Naomi's son. Naomi even nursed the child. So Ruth, chapter 1, prologue. Naomi loses her family, and then Naomi's emptiness, where her and Ruth return to Bethlehem. This is a short book, so we can actually read the book here together. It came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons, and the name of the man was Elimelech. It is, my God is king. Right? So his parents had the right perspective again, but notice who was the king. Remember, throughout the book of Judges, we're seeing, because there was no king, everyone does right in their eyes. They had the right perspective. My God is king. And that's essentially what it was, even when it came to the time of Samuel, when God says, they're not rejecting you, they've rejected me. And they're asking for a human king. So Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi. Naomi means my delight, my pleasures. And the name of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, they're Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. You of Bethlehem Ephrata. So they're Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. They came into the country of Moab, and they continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left of her 2 sons and her husband. So Naomi's emptiness, right? Her loss here. So she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them bread. So remember, they left because there's a famine. Now 10 years have passed, and she's here that they've been given bread. And it's interesting because Bethlehem is the house of bread. So I said, hey, I heard the house of bread's got bread again. I'm gonna go home. And so she went forth out of the place where she was, and her 2 daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, you go to your mom's house. You go to your mom's, you go to your mom's. The Lord, may he deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead. You know, you were good to your husbands, you were good to me. May the Lord bless you in return, in same kind. And the Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. And then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice, and they wept. And they said to her, surely we'll return with you unto your people. Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Aren't there any more? There aren't any more sons in my womb that they could be your husbands. You know, turn again, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband also tonight and should also bear sons, would you tarry for them till they were grown? Would you, I did have a husband, and would you wait for my kids to get old enough? What can I give you? She's saying, I have nothing. I'm empty. I lost my husband, lost my sons. I have nothing to give you. I can't provide for you. May the Lord bless you. Stay here with go back to your families, and may the Lord bless you there. Would you stay for them having husbands? Nay, my daughters, it grieves me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. This is where her perspective was. What is your perspective when you're having hard times? When you're having death fall around you, or crushing things at work, crushing things at home from your spouse, your kids, your kids are doing things they ought not to be, or your spouse. Are you viewing that this is punishment? Or you seeing the hand of the Lord work in some other type of way? Yes, there could be times when it's punishment. Yes, there's essentially like 3 things that are happening when you're going through any trial. One, you're doing something right, and you're being pruned, or you're being purified. You're doing something wrong and you're getting punished. Or 3, time and chance happen. It just happened. Things happen in this life. Sin has been set in motion from practically the beginning, and things occur. Death has been brought. We all die, whether we're righteous or unrighteous. Right? These things happen. But he says, the author continues saying, they lift up their voice and they wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave to her. Just no, thinking, I'm with you. Orpah's like, okay, you give me the blessing to go, I'll go. And we never hear of Orpah again. But Ruth, man, what does she step into? What a blessing. And she said, behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people. So Orpah kissed her and went goodbye. And so she says to Ruth, hey, your sister left. Go back to people. She went back to her people and her gods. Why don't you return just like your sister-in-law? And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you, or to return from following after you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. There I'll be buried. And the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death separates you and I. And when Naomi saw that Ruth was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left off speaking unto her. She didn't plead with her no more to leave. She's like, all right, Ruth's here. She's resolved to be with me. You know, Moabites weren't a welcome people in Israel. So that's probably part of what was going on with her. Remember, Moabite women were the major issue in Numbers 25. You know, yet here was, I find this story interesting that here is this woman, and I wonder that's also why it's part of the story and what it's saying, that the faithfulness unto God and unto her mother-in-law and to Boaz that Ruth exhibits is beyond what we read of other people of Israel. And here she is as a Moabitess. Her faith, her faithfulness, her loyalty, it's impeccable. Her humbleness throughout this book. This book is such a breath of fresh air and such a shining light as opposed to the last book we just read of Judges, and that this happened at the same time period. And to see, because throughout this book we read not only of her faithfulness, but that of Boaz and that of the peoples, that they were sticking to what the Torah, because this is people of the covenant of Moses, and these people were ardent to adhere to it in their walk. And we see it there, just of the towns in general there of Bethlehem, Judah, where these things are taking place. So it's really refreshing to see where these people are. So when she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left us speak, and the two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass when they were come to Bethlehem that all the city was moved about them. And they said, is that Naomi? They haven't seen her. She's been gone 10 years, at least. And so they say, wow, is that Naomi? And she's like, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Because remember, Naomi means my delight. And she was feeling empty. And so she said, call me Mara, which Mara, bitter. Remember when Moses led the children of Israel and they came to the waters, and says they couldn't because the waters were bitter. That's Mara. And you had to cast a tree into it to make the water sweet. So she said, don't call me delight. Call me bitter. And why'd she say this? Why'd she say that? She says, because the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord brought me home again empty. How can you call me Naomi? I went out and I had the riches of a husband and sons, and he took that from me. I come home with nothing. So she wasn't getting the picture yet of what's happening. She didn't. I sometimes wonder, how much did Joseph understand? Was he understanding it in the moment, or is it more hindsight? Said, hey, what you guys thought was evil against me was actually for good. So is she getting she obviously isn't getting the picture here yet of what's going on and what this is going to work, and how much more a blessing that she'll receive than what she lost. Like the book of Job. Everything he lost, his sons and daughters, but he said he was blessed multifold. She said, the Lord has testified against me. The Almighty has afflicted me. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. So they came to the house of bread at the time when some of the grain for the bread was beginning to be harvested. So this, of course, would be in the month of Aviv, right? Because they're coming in to harvest the barley, which means at this point, the wave sheaf has already been cut and waved, so the harvest can begin here in this time period. So chapter 2, this is Naomi's awakened hope. Boaz meets Ruth, and Ruth meets Boaz. So Naomi had a kinsman of her husband. He was a mighty man of wealth. Now that word wealth in the Hebrew is elsewhere translated valor or valiant. And in fact, it's used, yes, it's about character, that he was a virtuous man, but he was also a man of wealth, as we can see by the amount of land he had, how long it took to harvest in his harvest, the various workers that he had harvesting his harvest day by day, shows he had a nice plot of land and a bunch of servants. So yes, he was wealthy, but this word means he was virtuous. Okay. He was of the family of Elimelech. Who was Elimelech? Elimelech? Do you remember? That was Naomi's husband who passed away. So her husband had a relative, and he was Boaz. Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, let me go into the field and glean ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. So she goes, I'm just going to go out there and start gleaning, because we know in the law of Moses, and I'll cite that law shortly here, that they were the poor were allowed to come in and glean in the fields after the harvesters. And so she says, I'm going to go try to get us some food. So you stay here, I'm going to go out there, and by chance I'll find someone that I can go do it. So she went and she came and she gleaned in the field after the reapers, and she happened to light upon a part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless thee. And I highlighted this here again to show where the people are. That Boaz is one, he's a mighty man of valor or virtue. And then we see him coming here and he meets people, and Yehovah be with you. He's blessing the people in the name of God. And they reply, Yehovah bless you. So this is, again, a great light in the days of the judges to see this here. Boaz said to a servant that was set over the reapers, whose damsel is this? And the servant that was set over the reapers answered and said, that's that Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. She said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and has continued even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. And so Boaz said to Ruth, don't you hear, my daughter? Don't go to glean another field. Don't go from here. You abide here fast. You stay by my maidens. Don't let your eyes be on the field that they reap, and then you go after them. Have I not charged the young men that they don't touch you? And when you're thirsty, you go to the vessels. You drink that what the young men have drawn. They're going to draw water for you when you're out here working in the field. And then she fell on her face and she bowed herself to the ground. And she said to him, why have I found grace in your eyes that you should take knowledge of me, seeing that I'm a stranger? And Boaz answered and said unto her, it has been fully showed me all that you have done unto your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother in the land of your nativity, and you're come to a people which you didn't know before till now. The Lord recompense your work, and a full reward be given you of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings that you are come to trust. She said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for that you have comforted me, and you have spoken friendly unto your handmaid, though I not be like one of your own handmaidens. So again, the humility in the virtue of Ruth as she's coming in And it's seen and it's made evident to Boaz's servants as they say, hey, this woman's been here. She came here in humility, asked if she can do this, trying to support Naomi, your relative. And she's been here all day doing this, all day. And so Boaz is like, that's beautiful. And may the Lord bless you. That, he's looking back on her. He said, all the children, you've been faithful to my relatives since the day your husbands died. And you've left your land to come here to serve her. That's a blessing that you're showing such love for her. So here we see what was happening. It's like the law in the law of Moses, Leviticus 19, 9-10 says, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not glean your vineyards, nor shall you gather every grape of the vineyard, but you leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. So when they're off there harvesting, they're not supposed to take everything and strip down to nothing. They're supposed to leave food there so others can come in who are poor and they can get it. So in this case, the poor still worked for their food. You didn't gather it and go give it to them. They had to come in and glean it themselves. And then Deuteronomy 24:19, when you cut down your harvest in your field and you forgot a sheaf in the field, don't go again to fetch it, for it shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, or the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. So in this instance, they had harvested, and when it says they forgot a sheaf in the field, that was because when they harvested and they would take the things and they would tie them off to dry in the field, and they may have forgot some of those stacks and leave them. That's for them to. So we find that Boaz went beyond this, as we'll read here in the next part here, that he was having them drop handfuls on purpose for her. So Boaz said to her, at mealtime, come here and you eat of the bread, you dip your morsel into vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched grain, and she ate, and she was sufficed, and she left. When she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and don't reproach her. So she can come, what you've harvested, she can come in and glean amongst that. Don't freak out on her for coming in by that stuff. And let some also fall handfuls on purpose for her. Leave them so she can glean them and rebuke her not. So she gleaned in the field until even, and she beat out that which she gleaned, and there was about an ephah of barley. She took it up, she went to the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she gleaned, and she brought forth, and she gave her what she had reserved after she had sufficed. And her mother-in-law said to her, where have you gleaned today? Where were you working? Blessed be he that did take knowledge of you. And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, the man's name whom I worked with today is Boaz. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be the name of Jehovah, who has not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. Here's what I'm saying. Naomi's hope now is reawakened. At this point, I think she came back to being Naomi and not Mara. She's saying, wow, I guess she's starting to see the Lord at work, saying, wow, okay, so I thought I came back and nothing, I'm left without a man, I'm left without anything and wait a second. Boaz is here. He's a relative. And we know that where her mind was going with this, because we're going to see in the next chapter her suggestion, her advice to Ruth, why her hope was awakened here. Naomi said to her, this man is near of kin to us. He's one of our next kinsmen. Ruth the Moabite said, he said to me also, you shall keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. So Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it's good, my daughter, that you go out with his maidens, that they meet not in any other field. So Ruth kept fast by all the maidens of Boaz to glean unto the end of the barley harvest and of the wheat harvest, and dealt with her mother-in-law. So the barley harvest, we know, begins there during the week of Passover with the wave sheaf. And she continued in this barley harvest. And this is all the way through the wheat harvest. So wheat harvest begins with Pentecost. So there's 7 weeks from Passover to Pentecost. She's out there every day, of course, not Sabbath, but she's out there gleaning every day. And then all the way through the wheat harvest and living with her mother-in-law, taking care of her. So chapter 3, that hope that was awakened now begins to get fulfilled. This is advice, a proposal, and a promise that occurs here in chapter 3. So Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Now isn't Boaz our kindred, with whose maidens that you were? Behold, he winnows barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash yourself, therefore, and anoint you. Put your clothes on you, and get down to the floor. But don't make yourself known unto the man until he's done eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down that you shall mark the place where he lies, and you shall go in and uncover his feet and lay thee down, and he will tell you what you shall do." Okay. There is no impropriety happening here. She isn't saying, "Hey, go play the harlot with this man." Right? Saying, "Go and lay at the foot of his bed." It isn't saying, "Go undress him, go seduce him." This was, again, one of the things that occurred in the culture, and oftentimes even a master and a slave or a worker type thing, they would stay at the feet of their master. And so she's there at his feet, right? And we see throughout this, both Boaz and Ruth are people of virtue. And Naomi's a person of virtue, so she isn't suggesting anything of impropriety here, lest anyone gets a misunderstanding of what's happening. So she says, "Go do this, lay down, and he will tell you what you shall do." So she knows that what she's asking Ruth to do is going to force the conversation that she wants to happen, right? And so she went down to the floor. She did according to all that her mother-in-law told her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly. She uncovered his feet and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight, the man was afraid. He turned to himself. Behold, a woman lay at his feet. He's there. He went, who's there? Who are you? And she said, "I'm Ruth, your handmaid. Spread your skirt over your handmaid. You are nearest kinsman." She just said, "Take me to be your wife. You are my kinsman redeemer." So, advice, proposal. Boaz said, "Blessed be you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning. Inasmuch as that you followed not the young men, whether poor or rich. But now, my daughter, fear not, I will do to you all that you require. For all the city of my people does know that you are a virtuous woman." That it's known. Ruth was so virtuous, it was known. People spoke about it. Hey, that Moabite woman who came back with Naomi. You see what diligence she works and supports her mother-in-law, how much she loves, how faithful she is, how much she's a servant there, and how virtuous she is amongst the people. She keeps herself from the young men, not chasing after them, not being a busybody. So she's well spoken of. This phrase, virtuous woman, virtuous, is the same phrase that was used to say he was a man of wealth, a mighty man of wealth. This is the same word used here in Proverbs 31. And taking a quick read here of Proverbs 31, this is very much like Ruth. Ruth was a Proverbs 31 woman. Who can find a worthy woman? Her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her. He shall have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm. All the days of her life she seeks wool and flax and works eagerly with her hands. She's like the merchant ships. She brings her bread from afar. She rises also while it's yet night and gives food to her household, portions for her servant girls. She considers a field and buys it. And with the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She girds her waist with strength and makes her arm strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp doesn't go out by night. She lays her hands to the distaff. Her hands hold the spindle. She opens her arms to the poor. Yea, she extends her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of the snow for her household, because her household is all clothed with scarlet. She makes for herself carpets of tapestry. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected in the gates. When he sits amongst the elders of the land, she makes linen garments and sells them, and delivers sashes to the merchants. Strength and dignity are her clothing. She laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Faithful instruction is on her tongues. She looks well to the ways of her household and doesn't eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also praises her. Many women do noble things, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful. Beauty is vain. But a woman who fears Yehovah, she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands. Let her works praise her in the gates. And truly, her works are praising her in the gates. He says, the whole city knows what a virtuous woman you are. He says, now it's true. I am your near kinsman. Howbeit there's a kinsman who's nearer than I. He's like, I might be like a second cousin to your father-in-law, but there's a first cousin out there, and he has first dibs. And so, again, we see Boaz's righteousness. Because he's saying, this, he's like, I thought you were so kind and wonderful to me at the first. Now you're saying you want to be my wife? Like, man, that's even more. He's like, but I got to do what's right in the Lord. And there's someone else who has a place in line before me. So he says, stay this night, and when it's morning, that if he will perform unto you a part of the kinsman, well, then let him do his kinsman part. He goes, so in the morning, we're going to go talk to his relative, and if he wants to be your kinsman, he'll be your kinsman. But if he won't do it, I'll be the part of the kinsman, as the Lord lives. So he says, lie down to the morning, and she lay at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one would know another. And he said, don't let it be known that a woman came into the floor. He said, bring the veil that you have upon you and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, laid it on her, and she went into the city. And she came to her mother-in-law, who said, who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, these 6 measures of barley he gave me. He said, go not empty to your mother-in-law. Then she said, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he has finished the thing this day. Saying, you wait. So again, we see Naomi's hope restored and saying, I know what a valiant man Boaz, and he is not going to rest until he sees this matter through. So chapter 4 here, Naomi's hope was now realized as we see Boaz redeem Ruth, and then we go from kinsman to king. So Boaz went up to the gate, and he sat down there, and behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spoke came by, of whom he said, oh, such a one, come here, sit down. And so he came around, and he sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. And they sat down, and he said unto the kinsman, Naomi, who's come again out of the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land which was our brother Elimelech's. And I thought to advertise to you, saying, buy it before the inhabitants, before the elders of my people. And if you redeem it, redeem it. But if you won't redeem it, then tell me so I can know, because there's none to redeem it besides you, and then I'm next in line. And he said, well, I'll redeem it. I'll take Naomi's land. And Boaz says, well, the day that you buy that field at the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it of Ruth the Moabitess. She's the wife of the dead, and you got to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. Saying, you want that land? You have to take Ruth and raise up a child to her husband's name. And he's like, I can't redeem it for myself, lest I mar my own inheritance. So you redeem the right yourself. I can't do it. And so Then it goes on to say, this is how it was in former times. I'll explain, here's the ritual that's about to happen next. Concerning redeeming and concerning changing, for to confirm all things, a man plucked off his shoe and gave it to his neighbor. This was a testimony in Israel. Therefore the kinsman said unto Boaz, buy it for you. Took off his shoe. Yeah. So, well, and I see the origin of this is Torah based, but not exactly Torah. And what I mean here is in Deuteronomy 25. If your brethren dwell together and one of them dies and has no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go unto her and take her unto him to wife to perform the duty of a husband's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she bears shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not be put out of Israel. So there's a concept of a kinsman redeemer. So Ruth had no child with her husband. And so he's saying, if you take this land, you got to take Ruth and you got to raise up a child unto her husband. And it'd be to his name. So his name doesn't die out in Israel. And so he says that the man doesn't want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up to his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. And the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him, and if he stands to it and says, I'm not taking her, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, loose his shoe from off of his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man that will not build up his brother's house. And his name should be called in Israel, the house of him who has his shoe loosed. So we see they kind of adapted it here in the days of the judges. And so instead of Ruth taking off his shoe and spitting in his face, it wasn't a dishonor for him. Basically he had an excuse. I can't do this because of this. And so he just normally, I shoe you. And so verse 9, chapter 4, Boaz said to the elders and to all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have brought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Kilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance, that the name of the dead be not cut off from among his brethren and from the gate of his place. So he's saying, I'm doing what God put forth in the covenant with Moses here in Deuteronomy to raise up honor unto Mahlon. And I'm raise up that his name's not cut off. And he says, you're all witnesses this day. And all people who were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that has come into your house like Rachel and Leah. And the two did build the house of Israel, which two did build the house of Israel, and that you do worthily in Ephrathah, and he be famous in Bethlehem. Let your house be like the house of Pharez, who Tamar bore unto Judah, of the seed which the Lord shall give you of this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she was his wife. He went in unto her, and the Lord gave her conception. She bare a son. And the women said unto Naomi, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the Lord, which has not left you this day without a kinsman. That his name be famous in Israel, that he shall be unto you a restorer of your life, and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law, which loves you, which is better for you than 7 sons, has borne him. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became nurse unto it. And the woman, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. These are the generations of Pharez. Pharez begat Hezron. Hezron begat Ram. Ram begat Aminadab. Aminadab begat Nashon. Nashon begat Salmon. And Salmon begat Boaz. Boaz begat Obed. Obed begat Jesse. And Jesse begat David. Key verse for the book of Ruth, that's not in the book of Ruth, is in Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for good to them that love God and to them who are called together according to his purpose. Naomi had lost sight of this concept at one point. She went hopeless when she saw things fall around her. But that hope was restored when she realized what the Lord can do, how the Lord can redeem a hopeless situation. So here's a great point that we learn in this, to not lose hope when things are seeming down or dark or dreary or death is all around you, or you're feeling like you lost everything and there's nothing for me in this world anymore. Well, that's not true, because God is in this world and he's got a greater thing waiting ahead for us. So cling unto him like Ruth clung unto Naomi. Don't let go. He will be your God. We will be his people. We continue in faith. That is it for today. As always, hope it's been a blessing.